Top 10 Most Desirable Classic Ford Mustangs in Existence. (1968) Ford Mustang Bullitt. Arguably one of the most famous movie Stang icons is the 1968 Mustang from Bullitt starring Steve McQueen. Here, the green Mustang can be seen chasing baddies in a Dodge Charger, ravaging the streets of San Francisco. For this chase scene alone, the Bullitt Mustang has remained an extremely popular one, showing up as multiple variants in Ford's Mustang lineup over the decades. So popular, in fact, that at a recent auction at Macomb in 2020, this car sold for an eye-popping $3.74 million. The one thing about the 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback Bullitt car that many people are unaware of is that once the car was officially handed over to the set and then to the first owner, it was no longer stock. The 390 was upgraded with milled heads built by Balkowski. It had heavy-duty motor mounts, a reinforced frame, an improved suspension system, a custom-built exhaust system, heavy-duty universal joints, reinforced shock mounts and stabilizer beams, and much more. The Bullitt Mustang is a basic-looking fastback that is anything but ordinary. (1969) Mach 1. Building upon the success of high-horsepower Mustangs in the 1960s, Ford decided to release their own version rivaling that of the Shelby GT350 and GT500. The Mach 1 came standard with a 351 cubic inch V8 and a 3-speed manual. Various upgrades were available, including an uprated 351, 390, and a 428 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8 with a 4-speed manual. Along with more powerful engines came stiffer suspension and thicker sway bars. Perhaps the most recognizable feature of the Mustang Mach 1 was the shaker hood, which consisted of a functional air scoop that directed air into the engine intake. The Mach 1 was sold well into the 1970s and even rendered the GT model unsellable for a period. Many Stang lovers consider the 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1 to be one of the last great models before they started going down in power. Not necessarily because Ford lost interest in the horsepower war, but because of the rising cost of fuel and insurance and the soon-to-be-in-effect emissions regulations, changes had to be made. Changes that would affect the landscape of the performance automotive industry forever. Shelby's GT500 variant of the Ford Mustang was equipped with a more powerful 428 cubic inch engine that put out an additional 50 horses under the hood compared to the GT350 of the time. With 355 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque, the GT500 was a healthy step up in power while offering a 4-speed manual or 3-speed automatic. GT500 was also equipped with a roll bar. The GT500 was a car made to be excessive, only to be succeeded by the GT500 KR, or King of the Road. This variant featured a 428 Cobra Jet V8 with various reworked engine components, bringing output past 400 horsepower. Ford and Shelby thought that the Ford Mustang GT500 with the big block 428 stuffed under the hood would catch the attention of old and young alike, but they quickly found out that the market for such a beast was limited to just a few. Most people wanting a performance car in the late 60s were looking for something a little easier and safer to drive. So to make things more appealing to the buying public, Ford and Shelby made some changes to the design, including adding a roll bar and harness that came standard, as well as a 3-speed automatic rather than a manual transmission. (1984) Ford Mustang SVO. A Mustang with a 4-cylinder? Yes, and what a 4-cylinder it was for the time. A turbocharged 2.3-liter inline-4 that produced 175 horsepower initially, and uprated to 205 horsepower not much later meant this lighter, more tech-oriented Mustang was one of the most competitive 4-cylinders of its time. It handled better and braked harder than its V8 GT counterpart. The SVO had a variable output selector based on fuel, giving drivers more options to fine-tune the way they use the SVO. Ultimately, enthusiasts still preferred the V8-powered Mustangs, despite the SVO's performance advantages. What you need to keep in mind, though, is that during the 1980s, federal emissions laws kept horsepower and torque limited because of all the emissions regulations. Granted, they are even more strict today, but the technology is way more advanced in today's modern world, so you need to think like you were in the 1980s. For the time period, the 1984 Ford Mustang SVO was the perfect combination of power, torque, and fuel efficiency, while staying within all the guidelines set into place. One of the most replicated movie Mustangs is from Gone in 60 Seconds, the 2000 remake of the 1974 car heist thriller where Eleanor appeared as the Halo car. As the most desirable of all, Eleanor was the most elusive specialty vehicle on the list of cars to hijack. Culturally, many Mustangs can be seen at car shows replicating the famous 1967 GT500 movie car with the signature tan color, black racing stripes, and deep wheels, giving a wide and low but planted stance to the Eleanor GT500. Contrary to what many people think, Eleanor is not a 1974 fastback GT500. Instead, they are 1971 Mustangs. Yes, there were more than one, with 1973 front clips installed on them and a racing crate motor under the hood with a NOS system added on for good measure. The crate engine was not a 428 cubic inch displacement as might be expected, even though when sounds were used on screen, that is what you hear, but instead the mighty 351 Cleveland engine was used. The GT350 was Carroll Shelby's answer to Ford when asked if the car could be made to be more of a sports car and less of a commuter. The GT350 featured an uprated horsepower figure of 306 due to a revised intake. Beefier brakes and partly magnesium wheels were added, as were high-speed rated tires. The rear seats were removed to fit a full-size spare tire, allowing the GT350 to go racing and comply with SCCA rules. Later, Shelby made a deal with Hertz, and 1,001 350H designated cars were built for the Rent-A-Racer program. The cars were then sold off to customers as they left the rental fleet. The 1965 Ford Mustang GT350 is a NASCAR-ready race car tuned down to be street legal, which meets the requirements of the racing circuit and offers a street car that is a cut above the others. It may look like a basic Mustang from the outside, except for the badging, but once you start looking under the hood and chassis, you will see that there have been numerous changes to the original design. For example, the average intake has been removed and replaced with a high-rise intake, headers, aluminum valve covers, racing brake package, a decambered front suspension, altered steering geometry, and a roll bar built inside. 1987 Mustang Foxbody 5.0. Perhaps the most popular 5.0 Mustang, the Foxbody Mustang 5.0 GT still stands as a wildly popular way to obtain 5.0 liter status for a reasonable amount of money. Modified Foxbody Mustangs are often found at drag strips running unbelievably powerful engines, making the boxy 80s muscle car fly down the track. The Foxbody Mustangs just have a cool about them that seems to resonate with the Mustang community. The base level Ford Mustang for 1987 came with a small 4-banger. Gone were the 6-cylinder and the turbocharged 2.3 liter from the previous year, so the only other choice was the 5.0. One of the main problems owners found with these cars is that if they went all out most of the time, the frames would bend from the constant torque amounts put to them, especially if any work was added to make them produce more horsepower and more pound-feet of torque.
Magazine.
muscle car with a surround sound exhaust. That's how the 2012 Boss 302 was marketed. The beefed up 5.0 Mustang was aimed at slightly better handling and providing an astounding oral experience by adding small exhaust outlets that exit right below the driver and passenger, giving occupants the very best of the 5.0 Coyote V8. With a unique intake setup and higher horsepower, the 2012 Boss 302 was a force to be reckoned with. The rebirth of a legend is always something that people await with an anticipation level that can only be satisfied by climbing into the final product. Those waiting for the 302 Boss to come off the production lines in 2012 were pleasantly satisfied and completely caught off guard when they attempted to launch from the line for the first time. It was a comical sight from the sidelines because all you could hear was the roar of a beefy engine accompanied by a scream of tires and then nothing but a line of black smoke as far as the eye could see. But once launching was figured out, the 302 Boss was a muscle car to be reckoned with on the streets. The 2000 SVT Cobra R took the standard Cobra and added a slick side exit exhaust, tall rear wing, front splitter, and proper Recaro racing bucket seats. Additionally, the R-badged Cobra meant light weighting measures were taken to make the most of its already punchy 385 horsepower. The SVT Cobra R was the wildest of the Terminator generation Mustangs. To clarify, the standard 2000 Mustang Cobra had a 4.6-liter V8 under the hood that pushed out up to 320 horses, which is still a decent amount considering that these cars only weighed about 3,500 pounds. The difference between the SVT and the street version was all in the aerodynamics, which, combined with the extra horses and torque, made for a mean machine on the tracks. Too bad only around 300 units were produced, making it a hard model to find when you want to go out on the track and have a little fun. An instant classic, even upon its launch in 2015, the GT350 proved to be and will remain one of the most desirable Mustangs ever built. With its flat-plane crank V8, the GT350 brought a European flair to the Mustang that the world has never seen. A factory Mustang with a redline of over 8,000 RPM and an engine that shares characteristics with Ferrari V8s were elements the world never thought they would see from the humble American muscle car. This, combined with the S550 generation's independent rear suspension, was the car that solidified the Mustang's place as not only a muscle car, but an all-out sports car. One specific aspect of this car that needs mentioning is the MagnaRide dampening system that Ford Motor Company made sure to have installed on every Shelby Mustang coming off the assembly lines. Both the street-legal Ford Mustang Shelby GT350 and the track-only GT350R came with this system that would continually adjust how the suspension rode by passing an electric current through the hydraulic fluid in the shocks. Each corner and every bump is adjusted for within seconds to improve handling and performance. So, we have shared with you top 10 most desirable classic Ford Mustangs in existence. Hope they will be useful to you. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.